Troy Carr.
Here.
Jamie Clapham. Here. Katie Urban.
Here.
Donna Moore.
Here.
Walt Swan.
Here.
Angela Rafferty.
Here.
Christine Stephenson.
Here.
Absent with notice is Marissa Bond Ness and Alina Braun.
All right, thank you. May I invite everyone to stand for the Pledge of Allegiance, please? I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, before I take a motion to approve the proposed agenda, we do have some official edits. Since we do not have any of our student school board representatives, we will delete item number 7. Item number 7 is deleted. On our executive session, we need to make a deletion and an addition. We will be in SDCL-1-25-2.1. We will delete SDCL-1-25-2.3, and we will add 2.4. 2.4 is preparing for contract negotiations. So again, we will delete 2.3 and add 2.4. Any questions or need for clarity on those changes? All right, with that being said, I'll entertain a motion to approve the proposed agenda. So moved.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries. All right, tonight, sharing the success, South Dakota Achievement Test and National Board Teacher Certification.
Okay, very good. So tonight we're starting off with Sophia Lee. Sophia earned a perfect score on the spring 2025 South Dakota Math Assessment, which is absolutely outstanding and places her among the top performing students in our state. There were only 16 total students statewide that got a perfect score on the math test. So congratulations, Sophie. That is just great, and we are very proud to have you here tonight. If you want to join us, then yeah. Oh, yes. Oh, yes. Perfect. Very good. Yay. Thank you.
All right, congratulations again.
And if Stacy would join me. This is Stacy Smith. She is a kindergarten teacher at Knollwood Elementary. She has worked for Rapid City Area Schools for 16 years, and she just received her National Board Certification in December. National Board Certification is a very rigorous process, similar to board certification in other professions such as engineering or the medical field. It is a voluntary advanced certification system for teachers and requires a lot of time, dedication, and honest reflection, I hear. So we're very excited to have her with us tonight. I do. I do.
All right. Board members, hold on. The board would like to speak with you.
I'll stand with you.
Ms. Clapham.
I just wanted to say, one, we hear so often, not only like, yes, we need more teachers, but teachers that stay. And that just shows so much of your dedication and how much you care about our kids. We're so appreciative to have you. Having veteran teachers is so important in every building, and we are so grateful. And I will be very honest, knowing that also board certification isn't cheap either. And the fact that you chose to make that sacrifice just says what a truly altruistic and giving heart you have to dedicate to being a better educator. And just thank you so much for that dedication to our kids.
All right, thank you. Board member, anyone else like to comment? Again, thank you, congratulations.
She said that.
Right, open forum, we have one tonight, and I'll use her actual title. She wrote down Sarah Gross, but I'm gonna say Principal Gross.
It's Principal Dr.
No.
Principal Doctor.
No, let me,
Yes,
Dr. Principal.
yes.
okay. I come to you on my own behalf and not as Principal Gross so I'm going to talk to you in two parts today. Part one, a continuation of a series I like to call I Love My Job. And so, I've changed roles. Last year I was teaching first grade, and this year I get to lead a school. And I still love my job. Every day walking into a building with kids is phenomenal. It's not the same leading adults. Their teeth are not falling out of their faces, and they don't give you like the hugs that I got in first grade. So I might like first grade, like my first graders last year still have my heart. But I wanted to continue my series because I really feel that public schools and the power that we have to transform lives.
Mhm.
I feel it and I know it, and every day I cherish getting to go to school and the opportunity it gives me, and I'm honored to get to serve in that role. Now, part two is an update on something I've been working on in my free time using my own personal email, and just something that I guess I don't like the word passion, but it's pretty important to me. In South Dakota, about 5 years ago, our homeschool laws changed. And since COVID, we have seen that you've talked about it at one of your last study sessions about enrollment. Well, in September, I got a stray hair, and I emailed Tim Goodwin, our representative south of town, and he met with me for coffee. And I always figure you all have 1 hour of your time. And so through that, he was willing to carry a bill about homeschool. And I don't think that it's a dramatic bill or anything. I think it's what we call responsible homeschool. My neighbors homeschool, and they do a phenomenal job. You hear people, and they have co-ops, and they're in band and choir, and like the little girl next door is telling me, well, if you wanted to go to homeschool choir, you'd have to go at 1 o'clock. And I mean, they're getting into the community. And so this is for the irresponsible homeschool that our current laws allow. And so it has not been posted yet, But I met with him on Christmas Eve at the Colonial House and he hashed out some of the wording. And so what it does is goes back to the 2018 language where we check on kids annually. We know that they're where they are annually. And then it does require testing because we need to make sure that our kids are getting an education. My daughter's in 6th grade this year. She was a COVID baby. So her March of her kindergarten year, the school shut down. And so we did homeschool and we did the best we could for that year, so through the summer. And so, but her class is the class that kind of ends COVID, I think. Well, in a couple of years ago, she had a classmate return and they couldn't spell the word cat. And I was really like, huh? And so this is somebody who was out of school for 4 or 5 years and re-entered and now has had a lot of remediation. And this young person's now going to be in middle school and some substitute is well-meaning, is going to say, popcorn, your turn. And what's that person going to do when they're surrounded by their peers? They can't read out loud. And so he's going to become a behavior problem because that's a better option than showing your classmates that you can't read. And so what I'm here tonight to do is request that you reach out to your legislators as leaders, and that as a leader in the district, I want to say, responsible homeschooling, sure. To have one-on-one attention that can differentiate for my needs and my sleep schedule, that would be awesome. But we have to protect the kids that don't have, that the laws in South Dakota are currently allowing to have some irresponsible things happening. Whether it's pushing on a 20-day absence and then they fall off the map, where did they go? Are they getting an education? I feel like we owe it to the children of South Dakota to have more responsible homeschool legislation. And if it's not, it doesn't have to be just testing, but we need to know that kids are getting an adequate education. And so Representative Goodwin, I've emailed, again, using my own personal email and my own personal time because I know those lines and I will not cross them because what I do as an advocate has to be like Christmas Eve. Like I was like, okay, I'll go to the Colonial House, I'm around. I'll take a personal day, the day that I go to Pierre to testify if the bill gets there. All bills in South Dakota get a hearing. And so I will take my personal day and I will go there because I feel like my neighbors, my friends, it is how we achieve the American dream. When we move ourselves from poverty into, middle class, it's because of the education and the choices that we're allowed to make. And so the second part, not Principal Gross, Sarah Gross, community advocate, and somebody who loves Rapid City and the kids that I see might need us. And so I hope that you will let your legislator know that whatever Tim Goodwin's bill or whatever, reach out with your needs. So I apologize for not having it written and being slightly more articulate, but I appreciate the opportunity to come and talk to you on my own personal behalf.
All right, board members. Mrs. Urban.
Mrs. Gross, I did not know that. I was really surprised when I saw that bill and excited because it's rare to see conservative legislators take on the homeschool lobby. And like you said, I think we're all supportive of alternative education when it's meeting the needs of our kids, but we know that that's not always the case. And I feel like what's being offered is just common sense. So thank you for the reminder to reach out and thank you for being proactive.
Mrs. Stephenson.
Yeah, I just wanted to echo the thank you and for the reminder that we don't leave our citizen hats at the door when we take a job with the school district or when we decide to sit on the school board. There's a lot of things that when teachers ask me why I can't change something, the answer is, well, we have to talk to our legislators. And so I really appreciate you identifying a specific thing that could be addressed and could immediately improve the lives of students and kids in our state.
Hey, Mrs. Clapham.
I echo what the other two ladies said. I want to revisit the very beginning. And I just want to say thank you for taking on the challenge of taking on a building, going from a first grade classroom to taking on a building here can be a big change. And we are appreciative of that and your leadership. And I think even though, like, yes, it's on your personal time and but you are also leading by example and showing other educators and other parents and other that we have to advocate for our kids. And I appreciate that, best way to lead is by example. So I really do appreciate that. And we will definitely, I'm on the legislative committee, we will definitely be very vigorous and active this session.
Yeah, thank you, Ms. Gross.
She's signing.
Thank you again for your efforts in another important matter, and I too personally support that. And I think as a district, that is something that we can get behind because, as you said, we end up with those kids, and more times than not, as you've described the difficulties that happens, the district is the one that has to continue where their last education dropped off. So it is something very important to us. And as Ms. Clapham said, that we do now have a legislative committee, so we'll be excitedly waiting to hear when it drops and hear when you speak, and doing what we can to help out.
Thank you all.
Okay. All right. Superintendent report, Dr. Thompson.
Thank you. I am hopefully going to keep my report short this evening, as I know Mr. Sassy has an important report, as does Ms. Roberts. I just wanted to do a quick report out on the work that our cell phone policy committee has done. As a reminder, that committee was made up of teachers, principals, district directors, board members, and parents. We ended up meeting 3 times, October 22nd, 29th, and January 13th. There was a long gap between the last 2 meetings because we surveyed our staff, our parents, our community members during that time period, which I'll talk about in a minute. So the steps that the committee took were, during our first meeting, we did a review of the research, which you all have in front of you, which you can take home and read at your own leisure. At the next meeting, we developed a teacher, administrator, parent, and student survey. And we reviewed sample policies of schools within South Dakota, as well as similar sized schools across the nation. And you also have those to look at. Then on January 13th, we reviewed all of our survey results and in small groups developed recommendations that we believed we wanted to take to the board. And then we went through a consensus activity where the members of the committee could put a green dot on the piece of paper if they totally agreed with it and supported that recommendation. They could put a blue dot on it if they were unsure or they had additional questions, or they could put a red dot on it if they disagreed. And every one of the levels had all green dots. So we had 100% consensus as a committee, which is not where we were on the first meeting. So going through the research and the survey results really was meaningful for everybody. On the 19th, I provided our recommendations to our in-house attorney, Kelsey Parker, who will then work on taking our very simple language and making it into a legal policy. Those recommendations are, at the elementary level, all electronic communication devices must be kept in a student's backpack. So it's not just cell phones, it's also smartwatches and earbuds. We talked about those 3 things. And, who knows what it'll be next, if it'll be meta glasses or pens or whatever, but smart devices. At the middle school, all electronic communication devices must be kept in a student's locker. And at the high school, electronic communication devices may be used during unstructured times, such as lunch and passing periods. During class, however, devices must be put in the teacher's designated area. So whether that's a box or a calculator holder, wherever the teacher has designated. They're not to be used during class time. And then we recognize the fact that all of those levels would have to have accommodations for students that are on an IEP, a 504 plan, or have medical needs. So the next steps, once Kelsey has drafted a policy out of our language, that will go to the policy committee for review. And they will have the opportunity to make revisions if they so choose. Once the policy committee is done with it, it will come to the full board for your consideration. Once we have a policy approved, then our administration will look at that and our disciplinary matrix to make sure that they are in alignment. And then we will implement the policy at the beginning of the 26-27 school year. Are there any questions?
Mrs. Stephenson.
Thanks. You said you would do more on the surveys. What did you find from the surveys?
Oh goodness, you have all of the results with you.
Okay.
It would be hard to go over that right now. But in general, it supported the recommendations that we made. Although there were some variances across different grade levels, so.
And then I had a kind of a technical question. If a student is gonna claim medical necessity, will they have to be on a 504?
They would not necessarily have to be on a 504. They could be on an individual health plan or probably just even bring in, their doctor's recommendation.
Okay.
But we'll leave that up to Kelsey to tweeze that out.
Dr. Thompson, do you know if I heard your last statement about it complying with the disciplinary matrix, but will the policy have consequences?
No, we decided that that should be left up to the administration to decide as part of the disciplinary matrix, just like any other disciplinary issue that occurs across the district.
Okay, so the policy will be just what the recommendations are.
Correct.
I'm assuming maybe a statement that it will align with the disciplinary matrix, and then each building will determine what
Correct. And then,
consequences happen if there's a violation.
yeah, I mean, each level, so all the
Yeah.
elementaries
Sure,
would have to
yeah,
be the
yeah.
same, all the middle schools. And then that would come to the board in the student handbook.
Okay. All right, board members, any other? Ms. Stephanie?
I just have a follow-up to the 504. I would be, or 504/ individual health plan. I could see a lot of people coming to school with letters from doctors saying that they have anxiety and
Mhm.
saying the student needs, and that might be legitimate, but I can see there needing to be more structure to that process, and who do we say can diagnose with anxiety? A social worker, a mental health, a school counselor, a psychologist, a physician. I just see any gray area being utilized, and it's not that I think there are not. I believe there may be students who actually genuinely do have anxiety and
Mhm.
need their phone to treat that, but I could also see there being a lot of just opportunity to find someone to say it.
Okay, thank you. I'll have Kelsey look at that.
All right, any other board members? All right, thank you, Dr. Thompson, for
Thank-
your report.
Thank you.
Chief Financial Officer report, Mr. Sassy.
Okay. Thank you, President Carr. Give me 1 second here to. Okay, so tonight, board, I wanted to sort of pull all these concepts together that we've discussed over the past 4 or 5 meetings and start to really take a look at how this impacts our budget and what this actually means as we start to push deeper into the budget process. I'm going to hit these first few slides fairly quickly. None of this is new information. And then towards the middle part, we'll spend a bit more time on those slides. But again, just to give an overview of some of the conversation that we've had leading into this point, we are in a time period, this is my 17th budget cycle. And I think that I could say probably without a doubt that this is the one with the most uncertainty at this point, and really feels like a very volatile landscape that we're trying to navigate right now. And we are aware that we have some critical issues that face our district right now on the financial side. Obviously, the enrollment decline has a huge impact on revenue, puts a lot of pressure on the operating budget. Operating right now under the assumption that the information we have in terms of the governor's budget recommendation is going to hold, and we'll make changes to that when we hear more and when we see bills being presented that look like they might go a different direction than that. But right now, operating again under that premise, of course, puts major pressure on the budget, having no inflationary increase to be able to adjust for rising costs of salaries, materials, utilities, all those things that we experience just like any other business, puts a lot of pressure on our budget. We've talked about the idea that this is sort of a double whammy effect, where we have both the combination of enrollment loss and the state aid freeze, which really compounds the financial stress on the district. And all of that, of course, then leads to the revenue gap in looking specifically at the general fund. As we discussed, revenue projected to decline about 1.9% or about $1.8 million. So literally, if we looked at a trend line from last year to this year, we would see a downward trend line in terms of general fund revenue happening. So these are really the factors behind this pressure that our budget is facing. When we look at right now, sort of this zero-based budgeting approach, where we say, okay, we're gonna take our expense plan, we're gonna move it into next year, we're going to apply inflationary adjustments to those areas of the budget that we have no control over, that are going to increase no matter what we do or say about it, and then not looking at any compensation increases. We see we're right around the $97 million mark in terms of expenditures. When we compare that to our revenue projection, and again, this is using the 0% state aid increase, we are looking at about $91.8 million, as we just discussed. And so we see a projected deficit of about $5.3 million. I think there's some really important context that must be addressed when we have this conversation. And that context is that you all as a board over the past several years, and us as administration, have went out of our way to consistently exceed the state aid increases to try to do the best that we could to provide meaningful compensation increases to our employees. And that has, of course, had hopefully a significantly positive impact on our ability to recruit and retain and make up some of that ground. However, it also has impacts on the other side of that. And so since 2023, the district has increased average compensation approximately 20% over that time period, while the state has only increased the inflationary factor of state aid by 12.25%. So again, the district has gone well above and beyond what the state has passed on in terms of an inflationary increase. And that's part of what has brought us to the point that we're at today. And I think that's very important context and something that we have to keep in mind as we look at this situation. So, of course, we're going to be navigating some difficult budget choices over the next several months. One of those, and probably the one with the most significant impact to the district's budget, is compensation negotiations. We're right on the precipice of entering into those conversations. Employee compensation represents about 85% of total general fund expenses. Obviously, salary increases are very important for a number of reasons, but you're going to see here how that impacts this deficit, because it is such a high overall percentage of the makeup of general fund expenditures. The second being, how do we manage a deficit? So this is like when I reflect on my experience in education around business, you could write a whole book around how you manage a deficit and what that looks like. And but it really comes down to 4 different approaches. Obviously, The first being we've built up reserve in the general fund over time, and how do we lean on that reserve to strategically help to reduce this deficit? We can implement capital outlay flexibility transfer, which obviously has a host of issues. We could reduce expenditures or try to employ some type of strategic combination of those different options, which we're going to talk more about here very shortly. And then third, of course, this is not always something that we do well as school districts. We've talked about this before. Oftentimes because we're usually operating from a scarcity standpoint in terms of resources, we sometimes don't do a great job of looking deeper into the future and talking about what the impact looks like as we move down the road. Because oftentimes we're just trying to solve the problem right in front of us. And so we have to think often about the long-term sustainability of decisions, not only from a financial impact, but of course the impact on the instructional side of things, how that impacts operations, any of those decisions in terms of the operational atmosphere of our district. And then looking at long-term organizational health. Are we doing something that is putting the district in a position to be successful 5, 10, 15, 20 years from now? So lots of different lenses that we have to look at this issue through. When we think about that strategic deficit management approach, and a big part of how we manage this being the projected general fund cash reserves, compared to the projected deficit at this point of the process, it's highly likely that we will need some type of an operating transfer from the capital outlay fund. When we look at, again, the level of cash that we're going to have on hand and how that deficit would impact that cash, the long-term sustainability of relying only on the general fund reserve would not take us far into the future. And so the key question I think becomes, and something you're going to see play out throughout the next several slides, what transfer amount balances sustainability, minimizes the impact to capital outlay, and really, again, positions our district for future success as we look down the road past this year and in 5, 10, 15 years into the future. So just for some context, the district over the past 15 years, the average use of capital outlay flexibility has been about 10% of total revenue. Now, I should point out that that's what's been budgeted. What is actually spent is a different number. However, I felt like it was important to show you what's been budgeted as opposed to spent, because there's about 1 billion factors that impact how much you actually spend based on what's happening with your budget for that particular year. So on average, over a 15-year period, the district has budgeted about 10% as a capital outlay transfer. So if we look at that in the context of next year, right now our fiscal year 27 revenue projection for capital outlay is about 33 million. So that would be about 3.3 million in terms of a benchmark if we use that same figure. Just a bit more in terms of the impact of compensation and why this is such a big deal. So again, compensation makes up about 85% of general fund expenditures. The vast majority of expenditures, we've talked about this in the past, we're a people business, people intensive work that we do. And so that's really where the budget impact comes. Of the $96.7 million of overall general fund budget, 81.8 of that is tied up in compensation costs. So salaries, wages, payroll taxes, retirement contributions, health, insurance, all of those are feeding into that bucket. And so again, anytime we move compensation, it has a significant impact on that budget process. So thinking about, okay, as we set up the framework for the budget process, what are our base assumptions? We have to go into every year making a number of base assumptions about what's going to happen. Now, again, these can change as we work through the budget process. These things can change based on the legislation, based on our year-to-date spending, our year-to-date revenue numbers, all those things. However, we have to make assumptions we have to make assumptions so we can plan and start to move forward. And these are those base assumptions as it stands right now. So the first, again, being the state aid projection is 0% inflationary increase. The second being we've applied a 3% inflationary increase to discretionary budget categories. That's a little higher than what we've had in the past because, of course, we've seen much more significant inflation over the past several years. Again, the third being the assumption that we will have to use some type of capital outlay transfer without a more significant budget reduction process. It's going to be necessary at this point to balance the operational aspect. Again, thinking about the idea that another one of the strategies to deficit management is to try to reduce expenses to bring that deficit down. We're going to employ that as part of our strategy. Our reduction target at this point is going to be a $1 million budget reduction goal. That doesn't sound like a lot. However, over the past several years, we have done, I would say, a very good job of reducing the budget while also increasing compensation. And so oftentimes you didn't see a big drop from year to year of expenditures. And part of the reason was because as we were reducing expenses in other areas, we were increasing compensation, which is really the only strategy that allowed us to continue to address compensation that way. So at this point, that's going to be our reduction target. Again, district has historically budgeted approximately 10% in capital outlay flex support. And then lastly, I think, again, just thinking about the planning constraints, at this early point of the budgetary process, the precise reduction strategies that we'll employ are difficult to say because we have a lot of movement in terms of student numbers and trying to get the best projection that we can on what that's going to look like. And that has a big impact on how we approach that process. So we have to think about those types of issues at this point in the budgetary process.
Yeah.
Yes, ma'am.
So that average, we're saying over 10 to 15 years. So there have been years there's been a much more significant capital outlay transfer.
Yes.
Years actually had it.
Yes.
For longer.
Yes, ma'am. That's a great way to say it. So we're going to move into some compensation scenarios. And I really want to disclaimer this and make sure everyone understands these are not recommendations. We're simply looking at scenarios to give you a better idea of how, as we push compensation, that impacts all of those different factors, right? So again, if we look at how the 0% compensation increase stacks up, the initial deficit, as we just discussed, was 5.3 million. After the reduction process, assuming that we got all $1 million of our reduction goal, we'd be at about a $4.3 million deficit. If we made the assumption that we were going to use that 10% capital outlay transfer as we have historically, that would give us about $3.5 million in flexibility transfer. So the impact on general fund reserves then would be about $774,000 per year. When we look at that from the lens of how much cash we are projecting to end the fiscal year with, that would be sustainable for about 6.5 years. So you could go out into the future quite a ways before that became a greater issue. I want to make a very quick comment about the sustainability component of this. And this is, I don't know a better way to do this at this point, but we have to think about things in the context and in the box of this is what it looks like right now. And of course, in any of these situations, there are many, many factors that can change ultimately what that number looks like. And so, for example, over the last several years, we've underspent the general fund budget by 2 to 3 to 4%, which sounds like nothing. That sounds like a very minimal amount. However, when you're looking at that in the context of $100 million budget, 2 or 3 or 4% can be $2 million to $4 million. And then on the opposite side of that, your revenue numbers are shifting around. And so, for example, you could, I say this in a sort of tongue-in-cheek way, we could easily add $1 million to the general fund reserve, which then would dramatically impact that sustainability number. And so there's a lot of factors to the sustainability. I don't want to cause any panic as we look at some of these other scenarios. So just keep in mind, we're looking at these sustainability numbers under the context of this is what it looks like right now. And again, that can change. So let's talk about what it looks like as we start to increase compensation. And again, keep in mind that compensation not only includes wages, but obviously the FICA and retirement, the taxes that then go along with those increases. So if we looked at a 1.5% compensation increase, again, across the system, just layered across what we currently have budgeted for salaries, that would push that initial deficit up to about 6.2 million. After the $1 million reduction target down into the 5.2 range, capital outlay transfer of 3.5, reserve impact would be about 1.7 per year, excuse me. And again, under the current conditions, that's sustainable about 2.9 years. So as we push that, compensation figure has a dramatic impact, sort of reduces that runway we have in terms of looking out into the future and being able to sustain that. I also did a 2%. And what I want to highlight with this is sort of the very minimal amount between 1.5 and 2 that it takes to, again, increase that number fairly significantly because it makes up such a significant part of our budget. So under a 2% compensation increase, initial deficit goes up to about 6.6 million, 5.6 after reductions, $3.5 million capital outlay transfer. Reserve impact is about $2 million per year. So that cuts down that sustainability again to about just over a 2-year time period. So you can see how quickly compensation impacts that as we increase. And that was really the main idea behind giving you these scenarios and showing you how it impacts the bottom line. So obviously, we have some key decisions that we have to discuss through this process. I think that there are some guiding questions for our discussion tonight. I don't believe that we have to come out of this conversation with specific numbers. We're going to carry some of the conversation over into executive session. I do think what's really important is that all board members get to hopefully understand this picture better, ask questions, give their opinion, so that we can be unified in terms of how we're going to approach this situation as we move into the rest of the budgetary cycle. So I think a couple of good guiding questions are we comfortable with utilizing capital outlay flexibility transfer to help offset some of that deficit? And then second question being, if so, what is the appropriate percentage or specific amount for this transfer? And again, I don't know that we have to walk away from this conversation with that. However, in your mind, these should be framing up where we're going with the conversation. Again, I think there are several key considerations: long-term fiscal health. How does it impact not only the general fund, but the capital outlay fund as we think about the long-term independence and sustainability? How does it impact capital outlay? Obviously, as we remove resources from capital outlay, that has an impact in terms of how we approach a lot of the needs under capital outlay. And then lastly, I think that looking at some of the external indicators that we would commonly move the budget around is very important. So for example, what's happening with enrollment trends? What do we think is going to happen as we move into the future? Is enrollment going to stay steady, decline, increase? Obviously, we don't have a magic 8-ball, but we have to take some educated guesses at what that's going to look like. Education funding. What does that look like at the state level? What does that look like at the federal level? And then, of course, legislative issues. Are there pending policies as we think about what's playing out in peer that could impact us materially when we look at all that? So again, these are just important things that we keep in mind as we have this discussion. So I will turn it over. Questions, comments. I would like to give the Finance Committee an opportunity to comment, add any input they have. They've been immersed real deeply in this over the last couple months and probably heard way more than they've ever wanted to hear about a budget and a deficit and all those things. But certainly, any comments you all have, please feel free.
Mrs. Clapham?
So I just wanna kind of try to gain a better understanding. So if 0% to 0%, the bill that was passed last year as far as compensation, does that mean that basically doesn't have an effect because the state itself didn't give an increase? So that at a minimum doesn't threaten our, okay, like,
Yes.
not that that's really a good thing, because it's
No.
not, but
No, yeah. Again, I think it's something that compounds the pressure on districts and makes it more frustrating because the idea that the legislature linked teacher compensation directly to the inflationary increase of the state aid formula, and then coming back just a year later and saying, oh, hey, by the way, 0% is really frustrating. I shouldn't say the legislature, I should say the governor's recommendation. But yes, you're correct. So it's 97% of whatever the increase is. So
and my other question, that there's lots of them floating. in my head.
Please.
The other one that immediately comes to me, so when we've talked about, and I know sometimes we hear staff say, okay, compensation is not the same as salary, so we can't use them interchangeably, but that some of that, of course, is the rise in our benefit costs. And do we at this point, like, is all of this using an estimate of what we think benefit costs will go up? And that, is there the threat that it could, of course, go up more than we have estimated to do so?
yes, yes, and yes. So at this point, I've used a 10% increase to premiums in these figures. That's a that's a difficult art, not science, to be able to look and project based on. So I'm lucky enough to get included on the emails to HR and the updates to HR from our providers around what's happening with our trends in terms of health and all those things. That crew does a really great job of keeping us up to date on where they think we're headed, where our plan is going. And so I think that it's hard. However, that is probably a realistic number at this point in time. Now, again, we'll refine that as we get closer to the renewal date. There's always a spike in the winter months in terms of plan usage and a lot of the folks trying to maximize their benefit for that year and getting surgeries and having babies and all that fun stuff. So, those numbers can change over the second half of the year, probably will change, and we'll adjust for that. But I always think it's better to be aggressive in the front end as we're planning and then be able to come back and say, hey, good news, this is a 7% as opposed to a 10 or whatever the case may be. So, yeah, but that is built in here at this point.
All right, Mrs. Stephenson?
Thanks. I have comments as a finance committee member, but I did want a clarification on your projections for sustainability. Is that sustainable, or, we give a 2% increase to salaries. It's sustainable for 2 years. If next year the legislature also gives 0% and we give a 2%, and the year after that, there's a 0% and a 2%. Is that what's sustainable? Or is that
No.
what you assumed?
No. So that would be, okay, I'm glad you asked this because there's something else I need to mention that I think is really important, context around that number. So when I identify the year sustainable, that means taking the cash level of the general fund down to the identified reserve level of the district, which is 12%. So it's not taking general fund cash to zero. This got pointed out in the finance committee. I made a mental note to make sure I said that and I forgot. So I'm glad you brought it up. But it's taking us to the identified reserve level of our budget guide, which is 12%. So not to zero general fund cash, to 12%, which is approximately $12 to $13 million. What those numbers then are based on is the gap between where we're projecting cash to end at the end of this fiscal year and that 12% figure. However, then we look at it from, okay, if we just, again, carried this forward into the future, where we're at right now, and we're making a ton of assumptions with that, how many years could that sustain that deficit level at that point, or that amount of reserve that we're going to pull to help cover that deficit? So it's not taking into account, for example, okay, next year it's going to do this and this. It's just simply looking at that figure then divided by the number of years that we would need that. So
So
I think you point out my exact concept from before, which is there are just so many factors that could change between now and then. But obviously we have to operate on what we know right now.
So, but the projections are a 2% would cost us this year. And next year it would cost us this, and the next year it would cost us this. So
Yeah.
no matter what you do next year, or what we as a board decide to do next year,
Excuse me.
we're still gonna be paying for this year.
Absolutely.
To
Yeah.
carry it forward, we will always have to go into the general fund reserve until we don't have general fund reserve. So is there, I guess what I'm getting at is if we choose to do this, and then next year we make a similar decision.
Yeah.
Then it's gonna amplify itself. It's not,
Sure.
the 2.4 is not going away or if next year we make a similar decision, then it's gonna be like, well, you can do that for 6 months, and then it's not sustainable anymore.
Yes. Yeah.
Sure, yeah, I mean, always,
I think I totally understand where your thought process is going. What becomes very difficult is that there are just so many factors that change between now and then to make it really difficult to be able to say, here's what's going to happen as we
Yeah.
move into next year. What I would tell you is the best use of that figure is not necessarily to say, for example, at 2%, this is 2.4 years, and that's absolutely the number, and that's what it's going to look like, and use it more as a guide to how it's impacting the situation and sort of a way to look at the longer term ramification of that. Because we could just as easily say, hey, we had 100 students come back into the system next year. That gives us a nice bump. State had better than expected sales tax collections. They're giving us a 3%, and that whole situation swings in a totally different way. Again, I think this year in particular, we saw the impact of factors that all kind of worked against us in terms of what we had going on. So it's really hard to say. Again, I would use this figure more as like sort of a general guide around how it impacts and how deep we're moving into a reserve situation and how that impacts the overall budget, if that makes sense.
I guess what I'm trying to make the most, and I apologize, I should
No,
have
please.
just really clarified this with you before this meeting, but what I'm trying to wrap my mind around okay, that 2.4, I want to give a 2% raise, let's say, for example. And you're telling it's 2.4 years sustainable. If all other factors stay about the same, our enrollment stays the same or continues to decline at a couple hundred students a year, and the state, gives us a 3% or 0 or a 1, like nothing significant, but hopefully meets their obligation. And the 2.4 years comes up and
Yeah.
we're down to no more cushion. Are we in a situation where we have to say, we have to do a reduction in force,
Sure.
or we have to give pay cut? I mean, I want to give an increase this year, but I also don't want to set a board up in 3 years to say,
Sure.
oops, now everybody has to take a 5%
Sure.
pay cut.
Yeah.
And I mean, we can't see the future, but I'm wondering if that's what that means, kind
Yeah,
of.
yeah. I mean, I think your thought process is understandable, and I do think that what part of what we have to consider as we look at the situation is how are we positioning the district as we move into the future, and you know, we talked about this last year, which was again, a year where the district was more aggressive in compensation than the state, and there were good reasons for that. I supported you all in those decisions. However, we have to entertain the idea that that can have this type of an impact where we hit this time period, and unfortunately we've had things not work out the way we wanted them to, and this has exacerbated the situation. So I think you make a great point, and I think that right now we're seeing some of that play out as we're working through this process. Now, you know, again, where I think we have a more difficult time is when we start to say, and you are right. So once this compensation increase is built in the budget, it's there, unless we actively say, hey, we're pulling it back. We do have to deal with it and live with it. What becomes to me then the swinging factor is, okay, what happens with all those revenue indicators during that time period, enrollment, state aid, a lot of those different factors that we look at. If those go in a different direction, totally changes the picture of what this looks like. So, yeah, I think your thought process is accurate.
So just as a finance committee member, giving my input to all of this, I think, Coy, I appreciate how even keel you are, and but sometimes for me, just as someone who supports public education and sits up here, it's kind of like, oh, holy smokes, this is, I don't know if we can overstate how serious this is, you know, and the reason we have a general fund cushion is because we haven't met our we haven't spent all of our money that has been budgeted in the general fund the last couple of years. The reason we haven't is because we've been short of staff. And the reason that, and the short of staff means that all of our staff is feeling a pinch because they're all overworked and they don't feel like they have the support they need. And they need to get a raise. And if we give them a raise, we spend down the reserves and it might not be a sustainable raise. And so then we think, okay, well, we'll go from capital outlay. And I personally just want to say, like, I think that's a necessary thing to do to make that transfer. But we have a nice chunk of money in capital outlay, and the way that we're paying for Rapid Valley Elementary's expansion and renovation, which is totally necessary, is with a capital outlay reserve that Coy and other finance people and the facilities people have really built up over the years for just this thing. You know, we've started calling it like a buildings and land fund, but it's essentially just, it's our savings account. And the more we transfer from capital outlay, then we have less in that savings account. And as we know, last week, after going over the facilities plan and how we pay for that, we're relying on our savings account. And if we can't rely on that, then we have to issue bonds. And so it's a very much a rock and a hard place situation. And so we have to decide tonight what we're gonna, not tonight, as Coy said, we don't have to decide tonight. He'd like input tonight as to our comfort level with resuming the use of capital outlay transfers to the general fund. But I think we really need to think too about the importance of advocacy at this moment. You know, the legislative committee is going to be advocating, but we all need to advocate, and we need to get other students and parents and teachers to advocate. Because what we really need right now is to sit down with a group of legislators and say, what are we going to do in 3 years? You know, we've found a way. One statistic I'd like is, what percentage of our general fund has been salaries? As you said, we've made other cuts to increase salaries. So is that like right now it's salaries is 87%? 85. And did it used to be less?
Low to mid 80s up to that 85%. Just we again tilted that scale and swapped out other expenses for compensation.
I think in the medium term and moving forward, I think the board and the legislative committee, whoever's on it, needs to get a committee of legislators and really say, help us figure out how we're going to move forward after this moment. And so I just want to put the gravity out there. These numbers just, we have to do our best at this moment, but we have to be good stewards for the district, and it's a very challenging moment right now.
Before Ms. Urban, as a committee member, I'm going to save my comments for later on the agenda. So, Ms. Urban.
I think you're right, Christine. We have to think about the future, but also in this moment right now, we can influence the legislature. And even a 1%, whatever they can give us makes a meaningful difference in this budget coming up. So I think advocacy now and in the future is really important. And I think the challenge is we have to minimize the risk to the district, but also recognize that we have a number of priorities that are just as important, retaining our teachers and working on academic achievement. And you can't do that if you're not maintaining or increasing pay. And so it's very challenging, which makes that advocacy even more important. The other thing, Coy, you didn't put it in there, but I mean, we could use more than 10% of capital outlay. That's not a great option necessarily, but one thing that, I know in the past, I certainly have asked the question about, the state legislature, oh, you have all this money in reserves. Why aren't you using it? I think a lot of public schools have asked that question, and I look at our own budget and say, maybe this is the time. We are doing pretty well in our reserves. Maybe this is the exact example where we need to use it. So I think the question is just how much we're going to transfer, what we're going to use in reserves. Because at the end of the day, we see the numbers and we are going to have to dip into those. It's not even a question of if, it's just how much.
Mhm.
All right, any other questions for Mr. Sasse's report? All right, thank you, Mr. Sasse.
Excellent. Thank you, sir.
At this time, we're going to have a mid-year data update by Dr. Roberts.
There we go. Sorry, I was just taking a minute to get the slideshow up. I really appreciate your patience with me. So this is our mid-year update on our academic data. Just kind of, we finished mid-year assessments right before Christmas. And so this is just sharing out some of what we've got on how the school year is progressing so far. Trying to figure out why it won't let me change the slide. Is anybody who uses Google Slides very often, do you know why it's not advancing when I click on it? Maybe. Yep. Nope. Right, blow on it. See if we can get through it. All right, I think we might finally. The first thing I just wanted to remind you of some of the work that we previously have done as we were talking about our goals and what it takes for us to get together and to kind of hit those goals. We did a very simple exercise, and it took all of us working together 3 rounds to hit 100% of our goal. And so I just wanted to remind you of some of the challenges that come with that, and just think about, as we're talking about how much we have to expand the work that's done to hit goals as we're working in 22 buildings with over 12,000 students. So reasons that we look at data, we look at it because we need to make strategic district decisions, strategic school decisions, strategic grade level decisions, strategic student level decisions, strategic curriculum resource decisions, PD decisions, staffing decisions, and financial decisions. So this is just a small part of things that help inform other things that we do, the data that's in how we use it. In this summary, I just wanted to talk about that we have an item to celebrate, which is that our K-8 students are making academic gains. We do also have a concern that not all of our subgroups are growing at the same rate. First, in our student pillar, we look at our academics for students grades K through 1. And we use the Acadience benchmark. And this year, our goal was to improve that by 10% in both math and ELA. And as you can see in math, in our mid-year assessment, we could see that we had improved by 5.5%. So we're well on our way to that 10%. And our ELA has grown at 7.5%. So again, we're making some nice progress. When we look at it in our subgroups with the demographics, those that are in the blue and the green, it is above benchmark in the blue, those students and how they're achieving. Green is at benchmark, yellow is below benchmark, and red is well below benchmark. This is the statistics or the numbers that informed that last slide when you could see the graph. When we look at the growth in there, growth is not the same as achievement because we need our students to be growing in order to increase in achievement. And so we do want to look at both of those. And so in Acadience, when we're looking at our reading growth, the lightest blue is well above typical. The blue is above typical, the green is typical, and then the orange is below typical, and our red is well below typical. So this is how that group that we were just looking at their achievement, this is what their growth looks like in those subgroups. And here are the numbers that informed that last slide. One thing I do want to mention is that all of our students are on these slides only once. So those that are 2 or more races, that is the only section that they're in, and students and parents, they fill out these forms every year at the start of the school year. And so they self-select whatever they feel best fits them. When we're switching to math for kindergarten through 1st grade, this is what their achievement looks like. Again, the blue is above benchmark, the green is at benchmark, yellow is below benchmark, and red is well below. And you can see what that looks like for our different subcategories. If we had a group that had fewer than 10 students, we did not report on that because they could be identified because it's such a small group. Some of our subcategories, though, are fewer than 20 students. And here is the data that goes with that last bar graph.
I should know the answer to this. Is the benchmark middle of the year benchmark, or is that the end of year where we want kindergartners to be, or 1st graders?
It's on that compared, it's the benchmark for the year, and then we're looking at how they're progressing through the year. So it's not that benchmark is not a moving target.
Okay, that's what I
yeah.
was wondering. So, 20% well above the benchmark for where a kindergartner would be at the end of the year, or a 1st grader would be at the end. Okay.
Kindergartner, 1st grade.
Thanks.
Yeah. And then here is their growth. And again, we're looking at those groups in the blue and green that well above typical, typical, and then with our reds and oranges that are below. And here are the numbers that informed that. And again, we were looking at growth. And again, achievement and growth are not the same thing because we can have students that are growing a very large amount, but because they're behind, we're not seeing the gains in growth that we necessarily want to see. They will get there eventually, and we need to see really high levels of growth in order to get there, but growth and achievement are not the same. So for grades 2 through 8, we use the NWEA map. And our goal this year for the student pillar is about growth. And our goal was to see, or was about achievement. And our goal this year was to see a 2% gain on achievement. We have not been using achievement previously. We were focused only on growth. And so we set that goal this year for 2%. You can see that we already have exceeded that, where math is already 5% above and our ELA is 5% above as well. Here on this one, I did also note what the growth is so far when we're looking at what we did in the first half of the school year. And again, we want that growth to be over 50% because it shows that we're moving the way that we should. If the growth is below 50%, then we're not going to be making the gains that we need to. So the higher the growth, the faster we are gaining on our achievement. So for this, the map actually is broken down into some smaller areas where students that are, if they're in the lower 50% of achievement on this, that's the yellow, oranges, and reds. And if they're above the 50% mark, they're in the greens and blues. So you can see that for those subcategories. And then here are the statistics or the numbers that inform that last bar graph. We do see movement when we were comparing them. We were looking at the areas like in that first column, the first through 15. We're seeing those ones that are on the bottom side of 50%, we are seeing those shrink. And then we're seeing, in general, those ones that are above 50%, we're seeing those growing when we're looking at this chart from the beginning of year versus this middle of year one. So this is where we're seeing the growth for MAP. And so the blue is students that stayed the same or improved, and the yellow is where we did not see growth. The reasons for not seeing growth with students are probably as many as we have students. There's a wide variety of reasons for that. And then here are the numbers that go along with that bar graph. For math for grades 2 through 8, again, those colors that are the warm, the red, yellow, and orange, those students are 50% or below. And those that are in the cooler colors, the blues and greens, those students are at least 50% or above, or above 50% there. So you can see those subgroups and how that's sectioned out. And then here are the numbers. Like you could see on the last one, there was one of our subgroups where blue, there was one blue that was kind of through the roof. And then you can see here where that group, they're 95% or above. And you can see there is where that group is at. So again, you see the numbers that made that graph. When we're looking at math, this is where we're seeing our growth. Again, in the blue, students maintained or improved, and the yellow are students who did not grow. Yes.
So for a student who is, I guess, progressing steadily, didn't start at a deficit.
Mhm,
If their growth stays the same, then
mhm.
that means they are basically steadily growing, correct? So it's not necessarily, like, it's
Yes.
not necessarily negative. If you took your first map in September and your growth was 40%,
Right.
and then your growth was 40%, so that means you're not getting behind, you just aren't
Yeah, you're not really
rate of
gaining.
growth.
And then I would say also that it's kind of interesting because sometimes we see some of our students at the very high end that don't grow very much.
Right.
And so, I mean, it can be at both sides on both the extremes. Sometimes our students who are very low that are struggling, but we also have students, again, that are at the very high end that just, there's not a lot of space, room to go. And so they may be maintaining or they may not be growing, and maybe they were at the 93rd percentile, or, they're pretty high in there. So, yeah. It doesn't necessarily, the ones that are not showing growth doesn't necessarily mean that they were, their achievement isn't, looking good for them. So again, here are the, numbers that inform that last bar graph. I would like in the future to be able to share with you about our students that are on free and reduced lunch versus those that are not. I did not have time before. We only had like 3-4 days here in between when I talked to you last about this, but I do think that that data is very informed, helps us make other decisions, especially when we're looking at kind of what's going on in some of those schools where some of our students are struggling more financially than others. I did want to remind you that for our high school students, our goal is to maintain our pre-ACT and ACT scores. And the reason for that I've got a quote in here is because South Dakota is switching to the ACT from the South Dakota Achievement Test for our high school students, that they typically will see a 1 to 5 point or 2 to 5 point between their reduction in average scores. So for that reason, we were hope that we could maintain. I would never want to set a goal where we're going backwards, but we'll have to see how that looks with the change. But again, the Secretary of Education said that that is really what is to be anticipated, and other states who went to testing everybody with the ACT have seen that pattern already.
And this is the first year that we're gonna test.
It is. This is the first year. Yeah, we have been doing the pre-ACT and we have been doing the ACT, but it will look a little bit different because of some of the guidelines with how we accomplish state testing. Just because we were doing it because we wanted to, because we saw that it could benefit our students, but there's just some more stringent rules that a little on the end.
But those
Yeah.
numbers from 2025, the pre-ACTs, that's all 9th and 10th graders took
Yes.
it?
Yep.
And the 11th grade is
Yeah.
all 11th graders
Yep.
took it? Okay.
So just again, in summary, we do celebrate that our K-8 students are making academic gains. We're seeing growth on the goals that we set, the things that we can work on. That's exciting. It's good that we're seeing growth, but again, there's concern because not all subgroups are growing at the same rate. One thing that I would say as well is that we have action steps. We will continue working on our K-12 ELA resource adoption. We're seeing some really nice things in the numbers in those classrooms that piloted the adoption, the materials. We saw some really nice things in there, so we're very excited about it. We're starting a secondary math resource adoption. We are launching the district literacy leadership team. You all are approving a few things tonight that are going to help us get that going. We will continue our work on essential standards. We will continue our work with our RTI teams, and that RTI is response to intervention. And that's where we're looking at those scores and kind of deciding on how we can intervene and doing the work that we can. One thing I do want to say is that there are some limitations due to lack of staffing. Because it's some of those very interventionists, that those are positions that need to be, either we wait to post because we have to make sure all of our classrooms are full first because we can't intervene our way out of a tier 1 problem. So when they don't have good, solid instruction to start with, we can't provide enough interventions to get there. So it's important that we have those classrooms full. And then there are times that we have to move interventionists to classroom positions as well. So there is a part of just our struggles with hiring and some things with staffing that continue to impact this. In addition to seeing some things that we have in classrooms where we're seeing some classroom scores due to struggles with finding highly qualified staff. The last thing here is launching the District Achievement Task Force. That will be getting going as soon as we have our director position filled, but that's something we're really looking forward to as one of our action steps. As I'm wrapping up for questions, one thing I just have to say is that all of these students that we're looking at and that we're talking about and that we're testing, like they were your students or they will be your students or, they are students that we have now. But either way, they are all ours and we have a collective responsibility to them. And I would say that the community of Rapid City does, that this is something we cannot solve on our own. It really is too big for that. If we knew what it was, it's things that we would be doing already. We just continue looking at what can we do, what are things we can improve on, and there are endless cycles that we're working on. But we have not found the magic yet, and we don't know of anyone else that has, or we would be right there knocking at their door, begging to have them let us in so we could see it. So just keep working on it. But any questions?
Ms. Rafferty.
This is really exciting. I know the teachers have been working really hard
Mhm.
with the goals with the students. And it's exciting to see that in the K-8, it appears the students are halfway there to, meeting their goals.
Yeah.
I was just going to ask you, what has contributed to these higher test scores?
There's really quite a few things that have, and I would know that schools are working on internally on things that they're doing on their RTI and that we're working to spread some things that we're seeing there. We have a committee that's working a lot on that. And then just in a meeting that Dr. Strasser and I were having with some of our principals today, they were talking about the work that we've been doing with standards in their professional learning communities and how in seeing observations in the classroom that they're seeing learning targets that are hitting higher levels of rigor. They're seeing that impact instruction and the things that are going on that way. So yeah, I would say also just giving it time for some of the things that we learned as we're learning more about new things about reading and the science of reading. And last year we did a lot of learning, and this year we're able to put more of those things into play. And then with the literacy work that we're doing, we hope to just see that keep going so that we just can build and build from there. But just kind of keeping going with things. It's hard because we look at our next steps, our action steps, and sometimes it just feels so slow because we care about those students and we want them to have it right now. But it really is a marathon. It is not a sprint, and it really is just trying to keep going.
Thank you.
Ms. Lawson.
Mine is more of a comment, I guess, and I don't know about all the other schools, but I think, and a little bit maybe for the public and the rest of the board, but something that I've noticed a shift with my own students this is anecdotal, it's not research necessarily, but that, so my kids know their source and they talk to their teacher about this is my goal and this is why. And that wasn't a thing before. I remember when I was in school, it was just, you took a test, they handed you this thing back and you didn't really know or care what it meant. And I do think that gives them ownership, and it also gives them celebration when they do, if it's 2 points. And so that's something sometimes I think there's a perception of, by doing that, we're making students feel like their value isn't a test, but there are positive things to that. And I feel like I've seen it even with my kids and their peers. And so I know anecdotally, that's one thing that as the schools are doing their independent improvement, I know they're really inviting the students and the parents in to say, hey, let's celebrate this 2-point improvement. And so I'm
Yeah.
seeing that in real time. So I think that's, I said, it's a slow shift, but I think it's a good thing.
Yeah. Well, and research shows that students monitoring their own learning in that way has a really high effect size. It's something that matters. And the more we can get students into that, where they're seeing these are the skills and knowledge, these are the things that I need. And when I'm putting those in and I see myself gaining those and, taking those off the list of things I don't know and putting them on the list of things I do know, that makes a really big difference. So, that's a big part of it. Yeah.
All right, anyone else for Mrs. Stephenson?
So yes, congratulations on the improvements that that the district is seeing and that our students are seeing. I appreciate breaking down how different groups are doing, because I couldn't agree with you more. Like they're all our students.
Mhm.
They're all precious little hearts running around. And I would say, my two precious little parts of me that are running around this district are doing great, and I have really good things to say. And it tears at the heartstrings to see that not all kids are seeing that growth and seeing the improvement. And what we learned in our board retreat last week was that your system is perfectly designed for the results that you're getting. I'm really hopeful that the new staffing structure of the leadership team will help kind of redesign our system a little bit, so that we get the results that we want, which is
Yeah.
all students achieving at the highest level and not seeing those disparities between different groups. So I hope from the board level that we did the right thing, and that we can see that. And then when you had your slide of what's happening, I hope that there are some systemic changes that are happening, that can kind of lift everybody up.
Yeah, I appreciate, thank you for saying congratulations on the scores, though I would say they're ours. It is the district and, and I frequently we will talk to teachers like, we are the district. Who is it? Don't think that it's downtown. It's not that it's, who works in this building. It is all of us. That's what it is. And a lot of building administrators and teachers and paraprofessionals and, it's everything. It is the support from McKinney-Vento to our awesome student nutrition staff and all of that feeds into it and makes a difference. And yeah, they are doing a really good job. They're doing good things. And we are working hard to set things up so that we can get different results. And that sometimes is very painful. I'm excited about the change in restructuring too. Yeah, I can't wait to partner with whoever comes on board so that we can keep working on things.
Any other questions for Dr. Roberts?
Okay.
All right, thank you, Dr.
I
Roberts.
don't have a doctorate. I do
Well,
have to, but
That'd
but
be your
thank you.
That'd be your nickname for.
Yeah, yeah.
All right, thank you very much. That was an awesome report. Appreciate that. All right, at this time, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed letter of support for legislation reimbursing schools for reduced priced meals.
I'll motion.
Second.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the letter of support for legislation reimbursing schools for reduced price meals. Any discussion? Anybody have any questions? Ms. Zerben.
Just really quick, this is a bill that has gone through a couple of times. I think this is the fourth try. And what's great to see is there's a lot of bipartisan support. It's a great thing for districts, and it's not a massive expense for the state. But basically what it will do is for those hardworking families that are already probably struggling to make ends meet, it pays that reduced portion of their meal. So this would be a big win, especially as we continue to see, issues with people being able to pay or paying their school meals. So this is something that I'm really glad we can all support.
Anybody else?
Yeah, sorry, did I not? My hand.
I don't, now I do.
I just wanted to thank Representative Whitman. She did a lot of legwork on this, and it's always just incredibly exciting when the legislature says, what could I do to help public schools in this state? And I would also like to thank all the co-sponsors and everybody who came on board. This is just good for kids in South Dakota, and I'm really appreciative of the effort and hope that we can get it across the finish line.
Right. Very good. So I will take a vote now. We're ready for the question. All in favor of approving the letter of support for legislation reimbursing schools for reduced lunch price meals signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. A motion carries. There's, who has the letter that was circulating? Has everybody signed it? Okay, all right. There are no conflict of interest. I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed agreements and MOUs.
I'll motion.
Second.
It's been moved and second to approve the proposed agreements and MOUs. Any discussion? Ms. Clapham?
I just wanted to point out, I think sometimes, and I think Ms. Urban particularly brought forward, sometimes it's hard when you look at the pillars and we say, well, what are we, the student pillar, what are we facilities? And I just like want to point out, when you look at these proposed agreements, it's increased security at our entrances. We are focusing on that. We're not just talking about it, we're doing it. We are investing money in it. When we talk about facilities, the expansion at Rapid Valley, that's addressing facilities. Our literacy grant, when we talk about these scores and achievement, that's what we're doing. The DOE pathway, focusing on staff, on helping to bring in paras and increase our staff by getting more certified staff. So I think sometimes it's easy, we check off the box and say, oh, we approve, you know, whatever it is, and it sort of just looks like checking off things, but these are financial investments, these are commitments we are making to the strategic plan that we have all committed to. And so I just wanted to highlight that in many ways, every meeting, every month, we are doing things to show our commitment to what we have promised to do for this district.
Any other discussions? All right, we seem ready for the question. All in favor of approving these agreements and MOUs signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carries. Is there anything on the consent agenda a board member would like to pull for later discussion? All right, hearing none, I will entertain a motion to approve the proposed consent agenda.
Motion.
It's been moved and seconded to approve the proposed consent agenda. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please say no. Motion carried. Right, this time we're item 15, items for board information, committee reports.
I will report. I don't think the finance or facilities committee or legislative committee have met since the last meeting. And two of those are meeting tomorrow, just to let everybody know, the legislative committee and the finance committee. So we will have more reports next month from those three.
Same with community outreach. We just haven't met yet.
Same with mine. They're all next week, so.
Policy just met, we reported last meeting, so.
And instructional councils meeting next week, so whatever.
Yes.
All right, so I deduced that there are no committee reports?
Oh, really?
Okay. All right, moving on to other board members. Ms. Stephenson.
Yeah, I figured Ms. Clapham would have another too, and I wanted to go behind you. I thought I was gonna be behind you. Because, well, it's better because you're a hard act to follow. I wanted to say two things. The first, I really wanted to sincerely thank you, Dr. Thompson, President Carr and the rest of the district leaders for our retreat study session that felt like a retreat because it was long. I can ask a lot of questions and I can say just one more thing about 1,000 times, and you guys exhibited a lot of patience with me. And I left feeling more confident in my role and in our role and in the future of the district. And I recognize how much we were asking of you all to get away from your jobs for 7 hours and sit around and answer our questions and work with us and collaborate. And it just meant a lot. And I'm hopeful that you all felt that too, and that we as a district can move forward with the highest quality of leadership. I just felt really good about things, and I'm really optimistic about the district, the budget notwithstanding. Sorry, Coy. The other one, just on I just want to send a message to both of our high schools that it's been heavy, heavy, heavy for our high schools in the last week. And I've been carrying that weight. And I want to let our staff and our students and our administrators know that I appreciate the work they're doing at both high schools to address some of the hard things that have happened, and my thoughts are with them, and we'll get through this, but I'm really heartbroken for a lot of people right now.
Mrs. Clapham.
I'm gonna disagree with Ms. Stephenson because she is a hard act to follow. Many of the things that I was going to bring up, she did. And yes, thank you very much for the study session. It was very productive. It was, and I think it was hard, like, and not in a bad way, but just there, I think we got to have some challenging, complex conversations. And I'm very appreciative for that space. And I think it says a lot about how we choose to lead our students, that we all get in a room and we don't necessarily disagree, or we have hard conversations, but that we do it respectfully and we do it productively. And so I'm really grateful for that as well. And I agree with Christine too on that. We are all thinking about our students, families, communities that are having a really challenging time right now. That it's hard. And when we talk about all of those little hearts, I say, you know, every child in this district is somebody's baby. And so just thinking about all of our babies, whether they're 5 or 17 or 30, they're all our babies. And then it's hard. It's hard when to see them going through hard things. And I also wanted to say a congratulations to President Carr on receiving a Mayor's Challenge coin yesterday. That
But congratulations.
yes, so appreciative. It's a Mayor's Challenge coin, and it is a custom design medallion issued by the mayor's office to recognize individuals for significant contributions, service, or achievement within their community. So, ready to go.
Thank you, James.
That is all I have.
Mr. Swan.
Congratulations, President Carr.
Thank you very much.
For knowing exactly what that award was.
Yeah.
Mine comes in I know that we all have heavy hearts about about what's going on in the district right now, and my condolences to the families that are involved in speedy recovery to those students that were hurt. Mine is a little different, to carry a little more heavier news, I guess. Recently, we had the passing of Reverend Dr. Gerald Yellowhawk. I would like to wish condolences to his family. For those of you who do not know, Dr. Yellowhawk was not the first to have a feathering ceremony here in the Rapid City Area School District, but his work to continue the feathering ceremony has grown that event to what it is now, honoring over 100 and some Native American students throughout the region. I remember when we invited even Sturgis and Douglas used to come because it meant that much to him. And Dr. Yellowhawk presided over that ceremony for almost 2.5 decades. He was the man that blessed the ceremony. He was the one that brought the drum groups into the arenas of Central and Stevens, and he was also part of many different conversations regarding that, whether they were positive or negative. Dr. Yellowhawk continued and persevered to make this happen for our Native American students. So again, my condolences to the Yellowhawk family, the Yellowhawk Oyate. They're a big part of Rapid City. They're a big part of the Rapid City community, the Native community. It was I know that's a great loss, not only for Rapid City, but being in the same tribal member that he is, it's a great loss for our tribe. So thank you for this opportunity.
Thank you. Anyone else have a other? All right, at this time, I will entertain a motion to go into executive session SDCL one 25 2.1 and 2.4.
So moved.
Hold on. Okay, it has been moved and seconded to go into executive session. All in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any no, please say no. All right, at this time, we're officially in executive session. We'll take a